right, so we're here in Nashville, Tennessee, and I am honored to be joined by Vice President at Experis, Josh Kitchen. Josh, thank you so much for joining the podcast today.
Oh, Dan, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, we're going to get into a lot. We're going to talk about your journey with Amazon Connect, most recently, your journey with implementing Amazon Connect cases for case management. It's going to be fantastic. But first, let's start with an introduction of what you do for Experis and just a little bit of background about what Experis does to provide some context for the audience.
Thanks, Dan. Josh Kitchen, Vice President of our Managed Services team here at Experis Health Solutions. And we are a talent management company. So our division specifically works with health systems nationwide, Dan. And, we like to think of ourselves as the experts in the BPO and the managed services space around really service desk solutions and really kind of pioneering that into a new place, right? We love that buzzword out there called AI, right? And we are trying to drive forth and win that AI race and be one of those first to markets with not just only the AI race, right? But also kind of in a way where we're protecting that data that comes in. Because I think that's a big topic, right? Every health system I talk to, right, it says, what's going on with this AI, Josh?
Absolutely. And that's a huge part of contact center as well. And I know you have a big vision for implementing AI and generative AI into your contact center with Amazon Connect, which we're definitely going to get into your vision in a moment here. But I thought we could start with, let's go back to the very beginning. So your journey on Connect, how did it start? How did you determine, hey, you know what, we need a change in our contact center. Let's look at something else. And then how did you evaluate different solutions in the market? And then how did you ultimately decide on Amazon Connect?
That's a big question there, Dan.
It is a big question.
Ooh, it's a loaded one. So, I think this is kind of a fun, I like stories, right? Stories are great when you can kind of depict a story out and really talk about what's how did we get here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we actually were a implementation provider with the big EHRs, right? We did like Epic, Cerner, Meditech, Allscripts, and we would travel around all these health systems and help those health systems implement those EHRs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then COVID came around. And with COVID, we had to rethink our strategy. We couldn't get on airplanes. So we'd always deliver these help desk solutions during these implementations, but they would be on site or on-prem. So, when that day happened, right, when it's like the world just completely shut down, it was the next day we were like, how can we still do this stuff, right? Like we got to find a way to keep these solutions moving forward.
Absolutely.
Right. And it was that era that really kind of catapulted us into a new way of thinking. So we leveraged, kind of went through the play of multiple telephony vendors out there. And we said, how can we deliver these EHR services remotely? So we had to find, a way to take the phone calls, right? A way to even figure out how we take the phone calls. How do you hire people and then get computers to them, right? And then what kind of internet connections do these guys need to have, right? To be able to support in these platforms. So, it was questions of laundry list of questions that we kind of came through, and we interviewed several big box firms that did the contact centers, technology. Actually, at the start of it, Amazon Connect and AWS wasn't even a part of our journey, right? We actually started and selected a big box vendor that kind of seemed like they had everything put together, right? A real out of the box solution. And so that's how we got started in the contact center space and doing remote solutions. We had a health system in the Northeast that came to us that said, Josh, we need help scheduling patients for COVID tests. And they were, Dan, it's kind of unreal numbers for us, right? We were thinking, put on a handful of agents and take some phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
But wow, they were doing 50,000 phone calls a week.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
And their patient access teams, they were unable to support, the measure. They were over like 80% abandonment on all their phone calls. So they needed to provide help real time, real quick. And man, we tried to rise to that occasion to make it work, and that was the start of really the remote based solution, right? And when you start getting into that remote spectrum, you start realizing you get to build your own technology stack. And with your own technology stack, you're now almost creating custom solutions for a health system. You're no longer kind of just saying, Mr. Health System or Mrs. Health System, right? How do I support you with your technology, right? Because that's what we did, right? We would get into these hospital systems and deploy on-prem help desks, and we use their computers, right? We use their phone systems. We use their ticketing tools. But now we're remote, right? And it's harder to do that in a remote space because now every health system needs to ship you their own laptop, right? And now they're loading all these laptops up with their technology for a 3-week, 4-week engagement. And that's a lot of pressure on their IT team. So again, it kind of came to a place, right, where we said, well, it really came to a place where they said, we can't support you with our technology. You need to have your own. So, building our own, we, like I said, we started with a big box system out there on the West Coast. And the platform was great, right? It was expensive, though. And we realized that we had to charge the customers more, right, to provide this remote-based service. And, with anything, early adopters, right, you start seeing your competitors kind of come to market. And, before I knew it, more and more competitors were now using the software that we engaged with on that West Coast. People like to talk.
Yep. So
if they want to use that software, well, I have to come up with something new that they can't just get out of and go do it again. So I guess the long and short there, Dan, is we had to think differently. And when you work in a solution that's out of the box, it's out of the box. There's no creativity. There's no customization, right?
Right.
And that's what I thought Amazon and AWS could give us. It's and how does the Morse guys say it? They said, Josh, you're when you're with us, it's a blank canvas. You're the artist, and we're going to help you paint the picture. And really, it's that creativity that just gets the energy flowing and really allows you to create a new solution. And I think that's the key of what we're doing now, right? We're doing things that others have not done. They've not entered those waters yet, and that's really kind of how we got started in the AWS Connect space.
Well, that's amazing, and that can be a huge differentiator in your technology offerings as well. So it sounds like at first the catalyst for looking at a different solution was cost, because you weren't able to scale as much as you needed to. The costs were too high, and that was trickling down to your customers. So you started looking at Connect, and then you realized how creative you could be in building your own technology offering as well, which you didn't have before. It sounds like you were a bit more limited or constricted in what you could actually do. And when we were talking before, you mentioned that when you first started with Amazon Connect, you were a one-man show in implementing it, at least turning it on and starting to use it. Can you walk me through that experience a little bit? Because that's very interesting how you're able to do that.
Yeah, no, Dan, that's a good point. And I might have confused the audience a little bit here, right, with the beginning of the story. So when I talked about the healthcare implementation work that we were doing on-prem project work prior. And with COVID, we had to do a remote-based solution. Mm-hmm. And that remote-based solution was now remote for 2 to 4 weeks. When we had that customer in the Northeast call and say, we need to set up a new contact center. We don't know how many agents it's going to be. It's going to be, a lot of calls per week, right? 50,000 plus calls per week to schedule patients. It was at that very given moment where they needed to get this turned on in 2 weeks. So our big box vendor out of the West Coast that we were working with before, I want to say they needed like 6 weeks to get this thing implemented. We had to do an implementation plan, right? It was just constrictive, right? And so, wow, I want to say I was on LinkedIn and I saw an Amazon Connect URL, that was kind of like an advertisement, like in the contact center space, and clicked on it, looked at it, built at that very given moment, built myself an AWS console account first time, right? And I just started following the AWS, user guides that were on the web, and self-built a IVR, a queue system, added some agents, and we did this within about a week space notice, turned it on. It was bare bones, I mean, it could take the phone calls, but you realize quickly it was able to take the phone calls. It was able to give a dashboard to the customer pretty quickly, and it had a lot of great bones. So I think as being kind of the principal engineer behind designing that first space for our use case, it'll said, well, man, if I could do this, how much more could we really do, right? And when you can kind of take that journey, what the big box system was helping me do, and move it into this contained AWS Connect space, you just realize, wow, I mean, it was, gosh, I would say 80% reduced costs for telephony usage, right? But that wasn't really even the kicker, right? Kind of to your point, like, being a small organization, well, being a small piloted organization for running that new COVID kind of rapid vaccination scheduling and deployment center, right? We had to just get like we talked about, like a unique system set up and set up quickly, right? So as we deployed that out and we set that up, it was remarkable just how easy to use the Amazon Connect interface was. And that was that trigger moment, right? That trigger moment said, we have competitors using that big box system. We don't have any competitors that we know of at the moment using Amazon Connect. Let's go all in. So, I guess, I can always talk for years here, Dan, right? But,
yeah.
We definitely had some great conversations with the, AWS folks. And that's actually where we first got, hooked up with Morse, right? We met with our Amazon representative. They liked our use case, and they helped us do a whole pilot minimal viable product with the Aspen and the Morse folks.
So tell me more about that. How did that start exactly? And then what did you lean on Aspen and Morse to do?
Yeah, great question. We started with, we only knew, right, one kind of contact center structure. So we said that was our vision. That was our vision at first, right? So we took that vision of what that big box system had, brought that to Aspen at the time, and we built what they called a custom CCP, customer contact panel.
Custom, yes.
Custom something panel, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't the default native, Amazon workspace. That was kind of your out of the box system. We, and that was the thing, right? Like I had this thing. Like I wanted to be unique, right? No one's allowed to have what we have. Like this is going to be a product, and a product that we're manifesting out of all these great minds on my team, and we're going to build a contact center that everyone's going to want, but no one can have, right? Because it's going to be built by us, with us being the think tank, and we're going to be able to drive that to market in new ways. You kind of try to take that vision with the big box, big five software firm, right? And if that doesn't match their vision, right, we're not going to do it. So that's where Amazon got great, right? I mean, I had a bunch of development partnership, right? A development partnership, right, with Morse and Aspen, and it was just that. It was, what's your dream? What's your vision? Let's build that, and then we did it, right? So we spent about 2.5 months building out that minimal viable product, and lo and behold, it worked great. So we moved from our tech stack, from that big box West Coast vendor, and we moved it over. We shifted the whole business over to Amazon Connect at that time, and here we are 3 years later, still on the solution.
Well, that's fantastic. So how important do you think it is to work with the right partner in helping you build?
Let's see. So, I think when you think about partnership, it's like speed dating, right, Dan? Like, when you first meet someone, right, you can have a good vibe and everything can be going real well, right? But, I think all of us go through honeymoon phases with whoever we might work with.
Yeah.
And my journey and story with Aspen and Morse, right? It was a journey where I think with all relationships, right? You got highs, you got lows. But what really set apart, I think, our relationship to today, right, is we've been able to go through those struggles and overcome those struggles like partners, right? We communicate, we're transparent, we're talking about this, and we're being proactive about it, right? I don't think that there's anything worse in a partnership than, me having to find the problem and be reactive to you, right? Morse Aspen has been a great partner to say, hey, Josh, we looked forward and this is happening. We need to get ahead of this, but it's our fault, but we got to get ahead of this. That's partnership.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that transparency too. I mean, it's easy to get up here and say everything's been perfect and the relationship has been, no speed bumps at all, but there's ups and downs, like you said. So I appreciate that transparency. And when we were talking before this, you were saying some profound things about how to overcome some of those downs. And you mentioned something about it's conflict that really builds a relationship. I thought that was actually quite a profound statement, and I'd like for you to explain that a little bit more and put it in the context of when you were working with Aspen Morse building out your Amazon Connect solution.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, right? So we obviously, with any product that you build, you have this, I guess we call it scope creep in the development world, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a vision, so you start depicting that vision, and then your vision grows, but that wasn't in your statement of work.
Yeah,
right.
Happens all the time.
So then all of a sudden you're working with your development partnership team, and they want to do their best to support you, but when you keep changing things, that's not so friendly. Well, it gets to a point, right, where you can't keep making those changes, and you gotta be, the rubber meets the road, so to speak, right?
Yes.
So I would say that we got to a place of limitation in our custom CCP that we built, right? We liked what it did. It did everything at first in its perfect light. But as we wanted to evolve the product, right? I mean, that's what's so great about AWS, right? They innovate. They keep coming out with new products, right? They're pioneers in this space. And when we wanted to take the CCP to new heights with, Amazon Wisdom, which is now Amazon Q, right? Contact Lens, right? Some of these new generative, suggestive AI, semantic-based AI, it was going to be very expensive to do it in the custom CCP, right? Because it's a lot of custom development. So I kind of talking about the conflict, right, is we spent all this time building this custom CCP, and we transitioned or had that conversation of transitioning back to the default Amazon agent workspace. Well, I found that interesting, right? We, again, lot of energy went to building that CCP. And when, you kind of say, like, let's roll it back and take it a step back, right? That was some heartburn, right? Why? And, the root cause being when you go down a deep development phase and a deep development cycle, you're now missing out on all of those really interesting things that Amazon's building. So it was a collective of that partnership, right? And, Yasser, Yasser El-Hagan, right? Partnered with me over at the Morse End, and Yasser said, hey, Josh, I think what we need to do here is let's just roll it back. Let's take this thing back to the basics and then build upon all of those foundation items that you want, and then get it all in that agent workspace environment. And then now we can use and leverage existing Amazon teams that are building these products and these product owners, right? Yasser's like, I have these great relationships, right? So we can work within all these other counter teams. And we're now not just Morse. We're not just Experis. We're now Experis plus Morse plus Amazon, right? Or AWS.
Yep. So
now our strength just grew. And, that took a while to really absorb, right? I mean, think about that, right? I mean, that's a big, it's almost feel like you're going backwards.
Yeah.
But, here we are now, we are officially on the workspace, with elements of Amazon Q, elements of Contact Lens built into our product stack. And, I think we talked about this, Dan, right? We actually just launched Cases. So, Amazon Cases was a big push for going back to this agent workspace. So, we talked earlier about we were on a contact center from the West Coast. Well, we were also on another product on the West Coast from an ITSM vendor. With that ITSM vendor, kind of similar constraints and constructs, just there's limitations. It was their vision, not our vision. And move in all of our Amazon Cases, right, was part of that, build a product stack. How do you say this, right? You find yourself with a lot of arbitrary technology, right?
Yeah.
And Amazon helps you bring all of those arbitrary software programs really almost under one umbrella, right? I mean, you probably can take your day-to-day life right now over at Morse, and how many products are you in, right? I mean, you're in Microsoft Outlook, you're in Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, a lot.
You're probably in Amazon Chime, right? I mean, you're almost like inundated with all of these different technologies out there. And why in software are we not just in one central stack that we could modularize and build out ourselves, right? And like I said, share that vision of saying, my business processes and my business rules need these 7 different technologies to work. Well, do we need to change our business processes? Well, no, we still got to hire people. You still got to onboard people. You still got to train people. You got to pay people. You got to, get people in the schedule. You got to forecast, right? You got to, the list goes on, right, for running a business.
Absolutely.
And when you think about these items of kind of getting yourself back to the basics, and I'll kind of bring the ball back here for you, Dan, is Amazon's workspace now has allowed me to work with the other teams, right? So we were able to pull in stuff like the third-party apps, 3P, right? Pull in elements, Amazon Q, right? Much easier. Pull in elements, contact lens, much easier. Pull in cases, much easier, right? And the list goes on, right? So as we learn about the AWS roadmap, we're now able to pull more of these components in, right? We just met with, the AWS team as well as Morse and talking about using the forecast and scheduling features. That's amazing, right?
Absolutely.
Being able to move arbitrary systems into one consolidates the process. It takes the need for extra labor to do manual intervention processes, right? And before you know it, you have a solution stack that's built off the native solution, but it's customized to you and to your vision. So you're kind of, like I said, with modularity. I mean, how many AWS apps do we have out there? I mean, there's got to be a list of over 200 of them.
Hundreds, yeah.
Right, and when you think about all these different apps, and, I was talking to, who was I talking to? I was talking to Mick Shaw over there at Morse.
Yep.
And, me and Mick were just talking about these different apps just inside Connect. Well, that's not even all of the different AWS apps that are out there, right? So inside an app, there's an app inside an app inside an app, right? It's like it's like a present that you just keep you keep opening and finding more gifts under the tree. So it's exciting, right? Because nobody knows how all of this can connect, right? But that's the power of, to answer your question about a development partner, right? How important it is to have the experts in the field that have seen this work multiple ways, not just once, not just twice. But then can apply, right, that real life work experience to a vision that I'm just communicating out to a universe, right? And saying, well, if we try this, you'll be able to try or solve that. And knowing that the AWS product stack is so large, how do we get what we, how do we find the pieces that we want and, implement those? And that's been my, the benefit of working with Morse so far.
Well, that's outstanding. And that's great to hear. You mentioned your vision, and of course, the hottest buzzword that everyone knows about is generative AI right now.
Sure.
And AI in general, you have to find ways to leverage it in your contact center if you want to win. If you even want to be relevant serving your customers, I believe in the next 5 years, you have to build a, call it ChatGPT-like experience across all their different channels. So I think in the next 5 years, customers will expect that sort of experience when they call in a generative bot that can understand nuance and context, and it's not canned answers for canned questions. We've all been there before. How many times have you been on an IVR where you're not asking a question in the perfect way for the bot to understand?
Representative.
Yeah. We've all been there. Give me to an agent, right? Yep. That's what we always resort to. And, oh, no agents are available. Is this what you mean? Is it? No, it's very frustrating as a customer. So as these generative AI applications are so much more accessible to the everyday consumer, even just using ChatGPT, we're going to expect those experiences when we're interacting with brands, whether that be on voice for IVR whether that's chat or text channels. And if you're not doing that, I think it's a huge miss. And I know you have a vision for doing that. So that's my point is, what does your vision look like for implementing AI into your contact center? And I think it's primarily going to be leveraging Amazon Q and Contact Lens as well.
I think that's a neat question, Dan. You have to start with where, it's like the human body, right? Our heart is that core organ, right? That keeps us everything working, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to build a base when we think about any artificial intelligence, and that base has to be rock solid. To me, that base starts with the knowledge, right? It starts with the knowledge base. So think about that for a second. If you support 100 customers, 200 customers, 400 customers, all of that information that's unique to them is unique to them. So you have to have a great way of storing that, indexing that, and retrieving that information. So it's not only readily available for a smart IVR, it's not only readily available for your agents, readily available for self-service. The point is it starts, I really believe it starts with how that data is extracted, how that data is normalized, how it's used. Because when we have that data thinking right, we can now use the appropriate search strings to pull the information out, right? When we get the tagging right? You talked about the self-service IVR, like, hey, get me to my bank statement, right? We can actually listen to that significantly better. You have to think of the knowledge base, right, being it's our memories, right? I mean, these are the things that are going to get us to that home run with whoever that person is calling in. So whether it be a chatbot, whether it be a smart IVR, or whether it be an agent, right, that's never had training in your system. So, we talk about AI, and I think a lot of us always think of, there's a virtual machine doing all the work for us. Well, all that knowledge has to come from somewhere. They have to be trained somewhere, somehow, right? Would it be, great that we could have a virtual Dan that knows all of Dan's information and can do it just as good as Dan? Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to get there, right? I mean, that's what makes us human.
Yeah.
Right? So with that being said, though, and you talk about vision, right? Vision to me like I said, the vision to me starts with, how do you provide faster, more reliable, better service to the customers and at a reduced cost, right? So let's start with that. So knowledge base. You have semantic learning, you have generative learning, and you have semantic learning, right? I said semantic twice.
You did.
So
I was gonna let you keep
rolling.
rolling.
It's good. Let me plead the fifth and erase that comment, right? No. So suggestive AI. Let's start there.
Okay.
Right. So you think of all of this knowledge base material that's in your database, right? And that there could be a lot of data. Well, your AI tool needs to be able to be relevant, right? So think about, you brought up ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What a cool technology.
Absolutely.
Right. But ChatGPT is scouring all this data all over the web.
Yes.
Right? So we need to build a ChatGPT of this silo of this data.
Exactly.
Right? So our knowledge base is now in this silo. That's the cool part, right? Where our ChatGPT is living, breathing from this silo and not from any other external source, right? So now it's not going to give us misinformation. So when I talk about suggestive, right, how do we suggest now this information from our silo to what starts first? It starts with the agents, right? So the first part, or the first step, is get this information in a silo and start to suggest it to the agents while those calls are occurring, right? So this is, you're calling me, Dan, you want to do a password reset, right? Let's just take the most unique one out of the box. We all like to get a password reset. Well, I could be an agent supporting a dedicated model, or I could be a fractional model, right? This now allows your agents to be more fractional, which increases their utilization. But when you increase that utilization, you're now increasing their need to be able to rely on tangible, suggestive data, right? So I'm Agent Josh, and I now service 100 customers. That's a lot of workflows to remember exactly what to do. But my suggestive AI is listening to that call. It knows who's called in, right? What queue it came in from. So now it can like take a part of that silo and go even smaller, right? And now say, this is the password reset suggestive workflow, and pop it right on the screen for the agent, right? Because the AI knows. It knows what queues it came in from, right? The agent knows that there's a password reset question, and instead of them fumbling through, hitting a control find, right, or trying to fumble through an Excel spreadsheet or a PDF, Amazon queues just pop it right on their screen saying, "Hey, we think this user is talking about a password reset." They can click that information. It gives them their little snippet, right, and that's their exact workflow for them to do the password reset. So, I think that's the start of the vision. I think we have to start there, Dan, right? We have to start first with how do we get the AI into somewhere to really get the suggestive content right, because all of that data has to be ingested correctly, right? So I think once we get that mind, body, and soul of that data all right in that right location, and it's feeding that information right to those agents, right, we now can go down a deeper path. We can now really make a smart IVR. Right, that's even smarter than what other IVRs have been. We can make those chat bots more intelligent, right? As you mentioned, there's nothing more frustrating than working with a bot when the bot says, you want to do a password reset? And they're saying, would you like to change your bank routing number?
Yeah.
Just get me to somebody and let me talk to that human on the phone. But I do think you're going to eventually have, a virtual assistant, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have a virtual assistant that will be if it's a deep fake like you and me, right, talking and, being able to prescribe some variety of control mechanisms, I absolutely see that happening. But I think for us, right, here at Experis, what we got to start with first is, you got to find a great way to enable your agent community to be the best agent that they possibly can, increase their utilization, right, but also increase the outcomes for the customers they serve.
Absolutely. You made a great point there. It's not just about elevating the customer experience. It's about empowering your agents, which that goes hand in hand. The more an agent is empowered, the more real-time information and knowledge you can equip them with, the better they can serve the customer and get to faster resolutions. But there's another component of this too, and that's agent turnover. Turnover amongst contact center agents is one of the highest of any profession in the world. So is that part of your vision too, is how do we not only empower our agents to serve our customers better, but to make their job less stressful and help them be happier and actually enjoy their work more? I mean, I'm sure they love working at Experis. There's no doubt about that.
Of course.
I mean, Josh is there. How could you not? But that's got to be part of the vision too, right? Because that's creating a new and improved employee experience that can be a differentiator for you as well, and people coming to work for you.
I think when you talk about culture, that's at the heart of every business or operating mind in a business unit, right? You have to think about retaining great people retains the knowledge with them, right? And retention of that knowledge, that's worth its weight in gold. So how do you keep a workforce happy, right? For one, don't make them unhappy by giving them bad information to do their job.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That suggestive AI definitely helps, right? Two, right? I think another component of anyone that wants to be an employee is like, what's my growth? Where do I go from here, right? I think when you talk about call center, talk about attrition, right? We were just interfacing with a nearshore BPO. They were talking to us about, they receive around 80% attrition month over month. It's high. It's really high. So, I know you didn't ask this question specifically, right? But, last year we averaged 8.32% attrition. Like, this is something we measure. It's something we monitor, we track, right? You have to, right? You don't want to lose agents, right? That's not the way to succeed in this business. So, kind of not so much to the Amazon Connect space, right? But to the agent empowerment space, it's important that your agent community or your employees have a vision and a track record to grow, right? So is that an agent kind of track record growing into a different business line? Is it an agent growing into leadership? And one thing that's really great about our platform right now is it's one contact center, right? One massive software right now that's controlling all the flow, which makes it easy for someone to transition from business unit 1 to business unit 2. But that's it, right? It's like a major league farm system, right? You got the major leagues, right? You got the minor leagues, you got the AAA, AA, single A ball, right? And you got to raise through the ranks, right, to finally make it to the majors. So we have the same thing, right? We have your traditional customer IT service desk, right, where they get to learn the bare bones of being an agent, doing it right. We grow them right into a elevated state of, would you like to work in one of our patient call centers, right? So now they get to learn a little bit about the electronic health records, the EHRs. Well, as they dabble into that workspace and get good at it, right, they now have this promotion opportunity to join our patient access team. So our patient access team is a little bit of a compound of, it's not just the EHR. It's like now getting into some specific modules of that EHR, right, around scheduling and registration specific, right? But then the agent gets to grow from scheduling and registration, if they wanted to, into our clinical service desk teams, right? So our clinical service desk teams operate for providers, nurses, ancillary staff on the EHR, and how to and workflow functionality, right? And what those agents get to do is learn the scheduling and registration modules, right, which are important, right, for a hospital system, but then grow into learning how to use the other EHR applications and those other EHR modules. So now we've created the system, right, where they can raise themselves as a career status, right, from, let's call it a junior to a senior agent, right, but they also can raise themselves financially, right, to provide better for their families. And I think that's the vision, right? I mean, you got to have a clear path for people to see how they can succeed there and ultimately promote from within. When you need to hire a new lead because something happened or you grew, right? That's the most recent of our platform, right? We grew into a new patient access center, and when that patient access center started, we had to promote account management, we had to promote agent leads, we had to promote new QA resourcing, right? So when those promotions occur, I think it's important that you bring those promotions from the people that helped you get there.
No, completely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. And you talk about career progression and training and coaching your agents. Have you deployed or are you looking into evaluation forms for Amazon Connect as well?
No, tell me more about that one, Dan. Never heard of that one.
You haven't actually?
No, actually, I haven't even heard of this one.
Well, within Amazon Connect,
with all the 200 modules that are out there, right?
So
tell me more.
This is a new one for you. All right. So within Amazon Connect, there's something called evaluation forms, and a few very cool things about the evaluation forms. One is that you can build it by any set of criteria that you want to, right? So it can be as simple as, did my agent say the proper greeting when the customer called, and you score them accordingly. It could be a yes or no, or there could be a scale of maybe he said half the greeting right, maybe he said half wrong.
Okay.
And that all comes into a composite score at the end of the conversation with the customer, and it's from 0 to 100. So if an agent gets 100 out of 100 on the evaluation form, perfect interaction with the customer. If it's an 80 out of 100, where was he docked the points? Oh, he wasn't empathetic enough, which, believe it or not, you can build that in too. It's a little bit more subjective. Was the agent empathetic or sympathetic towards the customer?
Yeah, that's really important.
But it's very important, and you can train him on that. So maybe the agent isn't great at doing that, but he's great at everything else. Okay, to get him to those 100 out of 100 scores, train him on how to be a little bit more empathetic with the customer. Or maybe it's talking over the customer. That's something that you can score him on too. Does he talk over the customer too much? His score is going to go down a little bit because of that.
I thought for a second there, Dan, you were looking at me for interrupting you.
No, never. You never do that.
No, but I do think you brought up a good point, which is, we kind of call that quality assurance, right? So I think when you're in any contact center space, right, you have to be able to QA your team, right? And I think it's acceptable to say we're going to QA 10% of all the calls that come in, right? I mean, QAing 10% of all calls could be multiple QA resources doing that work. So that brings me to contact lens, right? You're talking about evaluation forms. That sounds really neat. We're going to definitely have to explore it, and we'll have to tee that conversation up, Dan, for sure. But what I thought was really cool about this year, right? We've partnered with Morse to deploy contact lens. So that's coming for us officially in Q3 to get that deployment, completely initialized and going. But what I'm most excited about with getting the contact lens deployment is being able to QA all the calls, right? Because now you're having that semantic view, right? And when we talk about AI, right, we have a semantic AI now, right? Looking at the calls, it's looking for those, let's call them modifiers to the success formula. And it's saying this call is a flagged call. So now instead of us QAing 10% of the calls, we can still QA 10% of the calls, but they're going to be the flag calls. All right, so I think of it, and this is what I said to Yasser and Mick. I said, hey, I kind of envision this as a, red, yellow, green, right? Where green means it passed the sniff test, right? We don't need to look at those calls. Or we look at them for training purposes, right? And then your yellows and your reds are the ones that we're monitoring now for QA. So I think that's going to be huge, right? Now where you can go to a customer and say, our calls are 100% QA'd.
That's amazing. And by the way, contact lens, going back to evaluation forms real quick, the last thing I'll say.
Is that a part of contact lens?
Well, contact lens.
That speaks over people?
No, I mean, if you really wanted it to, maybe. If that's kind of how you want to interact with your customers, I'm sure, you don't have customizable AWSs. I'm sure you could set it up that way. But the AI component of contact lens will grade the customer interaction. So it's going to listen into the call and give you a score automatically. Because think about it. How can you scale that if you've got 1,000 agents or even hundreds who are taking 10, 20 calls a day? If you're a supervisor, do you have enough time to sit down and listen to 100 calls a day and grade each one? Probably not. So that's where the AI comes in and grades them for you. You can always go back and manually audit them if there's something that maybe is a little bit more subjective, like was the agent polite? Could be a bit subjective. Maybe you want to go back and manually audit that. You have that option too. But the AI is going to enable the training and coaching opportunities for your agents really at scale, and actually enable you to do something that was probably impossible before. Because like I said, how can you sit down and listen to 200 phone calls a day when you have so many other things to do?
Well, I think it's interesting too, right, Dan? And you kind of said this earlier about agent attrition, and kind of talking about that being an impact out there. We're always stuck on the negatives in a contact center. It feels like it's hard to celebrate the wins, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times, a customer's happy when a customer's generally quiet and silent. Everything's working fine, right? They're not praising you, but a customer will reach out, right, when SLAs are missed or hold times are high.
Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of do the same. We fall into that same pitfall, right? As a contact center management operation at times, right? Where you're looking at, your call acceptance rates are low, right? Or, you didn't handle that call appropriately, right? Always you could have done something better thing. So I'm really pumped too about how the semantics can be used on the positive side of the house, right?
Yes.
So, when you talked about training and coaching, I mean, how great of it for something to help us pinpoint a great call.
Yes.
Right? Not just from CSAT scoring, right? But now looking at a call that we can broadcast out to the group and throw kudos out. Like, Agent Dan just had this amazing call. Everyone listen to the call recording, right? I mean, that's the power, right? I mean, I think you can enable this in multiple ways, right? It can protect you, right, from the QA of the bad, but it can also support you and alleviate or not alleviate, elevate that, that person or that agent, right, that did a great job, and really take it to new heights for recognition and acknowledgement, right? I think something that I'm excited to see too is the agent competition type work, right? I,
Mm.
I see that as a space that we can definitely evolve in, right? You think of running contests and running different kind of programs for agents, but I think we're kind of by human nature we're kind of competitive. I'm competitive. Are you competitive, Dan?
I am.
Yeah. So, if you and I were peers doing back-to-back calls and there was a contest for the day to say, who can handle the most calls, in a first call resolution rate with, excellent documentation, right? And receive, above, 95% CSAT scoring, right? And you and I have a way to compare and contrast each other, like racing, right? Like I almost envision it like, you have like the Derby, right? Like you got all these little horses with your little avatar is like a jockey, right? And we're all running this race together to see whose handle time's better, right?
The Agent
Who's
Kentucky Derby,
right?
like
The
that.
Agent Kentucky Derby, right? You got these first call resolutions running a race. You got handle times running a race, and you're just creating a more fun atmosphere for the community in large, right? Just to say, I just enjoy working here, right? It's not just about the satisfaction of helping patient families or a provider, document a very strategic medical case, right? It's now like we're having fun, beating our peers day to day, and that might come with a neat $50 Amazon gift card or whatever you want to call it, right? But the wins are there.
That's
Got to keep
phenomenal.
it positive.
That's such a great point, and I'm so glad you brought that up because it's so true, and it's a different way to frame how you think about providing a certain employee experience for your agents. And I really hope you implement that Agent Kentucky Derby soon because,
We're gonna have
that sounds incredible.
It would be fun.
Well, is betting going to be allowed? Could I place a wager on the?
It'll be on Sportsbook.
Okay, I'll have to look that up. All right, I like it. I want to go back to something you touched on a little bit about. You mentioned the password reset as a just standard example of somebody calling in, and that's something that an IVR bot should be able to help a customer with. But that leads me to a broader point of security or authentication, validating somebody's identity. And cybersecurity is really at the forefront of many businesses and their initiatives moving forward. It's becoming paramount and so important to put certain guardrails in place. You mentioned somebody calling in about a COVID program. There's going to be HIPAA compliance involved. There's going to be potentially medical information that needs to be talked about, a social security number. This can go across banking sectors. I need to apply for a credit card, or I just want to find out my bank balance. Well, we're going to need to verify you are who you say you are to prevent fraud. Have you put any technology in place in your current Amazon Connect stack for, say, voice biometrics, enhanced security measures for verifying callers, or not just callers, but people chatting or texting as well?
Well, I think you got an interesting part, right? There's multiple ways to kind of cut up what you just brought up there, Dan. And I think maybe start at kind of the root there, right? Of you said in the very beginning how cybersecurity can, be approached through password resets. So I want to maybe tackle that first, where you have different authentication layers, right? To partner with a customer.
Yep.
So we've talked about chatbots, we've talked about smart IVRs, we've talked about various AI doing various AI things, right? And the technology is already there, right? It just has to be implemented like an API, right? So, we do API work right now with multiple of the big box ITSM vendors, right? To move from our, Amazon cases, right, directly into, a bi-directional push-pull API relationship with, the customer's ITSM platform, right? And, that requires the, is it a SAML, is it an OAuth authentication, right? So
Sure.
What does a token security look like? So all the technology exists. It's just that partnership layer, right? Where it's now a customer saying, hey, let's give that experience, right? So let's start with your kind of chatbot example. You want to do a password reset. Well, depending how we authenticate with the customer's, Microsoft Exchange or its Active Directory, right? We can have that user verify right through the chatbot, right? They can enter their their employee number. We recognize this as a phone that that's a trusted number based on their record, right? And now we can authenticate back to them with a 6-digit code, right? And then that 6-digit code could be inserted back in on their phone, and it's now we've authenticated right on the customer's platform through our integration work that happens behind the scenes. And now that user has self-service at their fingertips, right? They can do a multitude of things. They could check their account balance, right? They could make a payment. They could update a password. That self-service capability now resides. So it starts right fundamentally at that security technical integration layer. And that's great. I mean, that's an awesome thing about Amazon, right? Connect has that capability on the IVR. It's got it on the chat. It's got it, the self-service kind of mechanism. It's, and because of the API integration work that we do with cases, right? We can push and pull information, based on our authentication handshakes. So you mentioned something about PHI and HIPAA, right? How do you protect that information? That's key, right? We talked about vision earlier, and we just met with a partner actually at reInvent this year.
Okay,
and we brought up to this partner, this Amazon partner, about how do we get our whole product stack HITRUST certified. So HITRUST certification is probably the highest certification you can get in the healthcare sector, right? To say you are truly HIPAA compliant, right? We have all the HIPAA compliance, right? We have, we do all the right things, right, that you need to do to be compliant. But to be third-party attested, HITRUST certified for our entire tech stack, now that's a game changer, right? That's a go-to-market strategy, right, where you have your ITSM system, your contact center system, right? We got our CSAT, semantic QA system, right? Those recordings, all that authentication, all those API connections, everything's under the HITRUST blanket, right? You now just moved yourself into what I would call it, game changer status, right? Because, right now, like I talked earlier, we have all these disproportionate or multiple software systems that we use to accomplish a singular business goal or outcome, and moving those practices under kind of one blanket, right, allows you to do that much better, and get that whole blanket now HITRUST certified, right? Get all that SOC compliance, get your ISO certifications. So those are the things I think that as we pioneer for the 2024, right, that our customers should be asking, right? Are you HITRUST certified in the healthcare space specifically, right? And if you're not, like, why not, right? I mean, you absolutely can get there. It's just it takes some time and it takes some money, and before you know it, you can have it. So again, that's we always talk about what we're looking forward to doing, but as we talk about these AI, Gen AI, suggestive AI, and semantic AI layers that we're implementing this year, that's definitely still forefront and center for a big initiative for us to implement. Outside of the Agent Kentucky Derby, of course. But
that's number one. We got to move that to the top of the priority list.
But getting HITRUST certification is going to be is a big deal. I fully believe that in the health sector, right? Just because cybersecurity is so sensitive right now. Yeah. And keeping folks at ease and is important, right? We have a whole GISP and InfoSec process to communicate to all of our customers that we maintain the absolute highest security protocols, with secure systems for how we approach partnering and maintaining an employee base that works remote, right? We have all those change controls as strong as anyone can, right, outside of locking everybody into a skiff somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, that's you don't quite want to do that. So it sounds like you have an incredible vision around becoming HITRUST certified, which is awesome. Can you talk a little bit more about how that's integrated with the contact center specifically, the HITRUST certification process? How important is it to have certain security protocols in place in your contact center platform?
Well, I mean, I think predominantly there, Dan, and I'll try to cut this up the right way I know how. Not being a high trust expert, but knowing that it's a very important certification in the industry.
Yeah.
I know that it starts with where all the data lives, right, and how we've encrypted and how we've ran token security procedures, right? With how long does a recording last in this this data lake or this S3 bucket, right? How long does that token encryption stay active, right? When does it expire? Those handshakes for those API tokens, like when do they reset? How long do they stay alive? So all of those behind the scenes widgets in AWS, right, have I would call a high trust procedure, right, to how it should be done. Now, again, I am not in any chance a high trust expert, and that's why we consulted one at reInvent.
Yeah.
But I'm very excited to say we just signed our master services agreement with this partner to implement and get that vision moving forward. So that's an exciting thing for us. But I think to answer your question, maybe where you were going with that, Dan, how does Connect and all of those bones inside AWS work towards high trust? And I think the way I would answer that is, it's all integrated, right? And AWS or Amazon Connect is kind of the core, right? So we have to, in every which way Connect works, right, we're going to have to, peel back the onion and figure out, is that the appropriate security process, right? So we're going to have to really look under the hood, right? So I think that's going to be a fun initiative that will just only make us better to our customers, right? Making sure we are following best practices in the industry, right? And, we always talk about that win scenario, right? Where everyone wins. And on the More side, right, being our dev partner, right, we now get that insight and that technology understanding to say, how should we build platforms moving forward? So that's probably how I would probably approach or look at that.
Okay, I like that. So going back to cases,
sure,
we're going to jump back a little bit. What was your vision for moving off of, we'll call it Business Line 2, the case management system that you formerly had, and onto Connect Cases? Why did you want to do that, and what is it going to enable you to do within Amazon Connect in your contact center?
Well, I started out when we talked about when we went from on-prem to remote at the beginning.
Yep.
We went from on-prem to remote, right, to support project-based work. And when we support project-based work, we're supporting, large amounts of people for a short, compressed time frame of support. So we have this thing in our EHR space called a go live. Okay, this means, we spend 2 years getting an EHR all ready, sometimes longer, right? So we spend 2+ years, right, getting an EHR ready with the health system, and then we have the day, right? We have this day where we flip the light switch, and every department in that hospital system goes live on this new EHR. So, you've gone through the training. You've gone through all of these steps to get them to victory lane. Well, it's kind of like what I think of as the, you go to a department store, right? And you can ask questions. Where do I find this? Where do I find that? Right? And someone can direct you where to go. Mm-hmm. And sometimes someone can, help you, fit you for that suit, right?
Yeah.
So kind of think about deploying out these agent technicians, right, into the field. And I'm getting to your answer here, Dan, I promise.
No, this is good. This is great. Thank you.
But we would deploy, I think on some of our biggest projects, 1,000 people.
It's a lot.
For 2 weeks of work.
A lot of people on one project.
So think about it. I'm hiring 1,000 people.
Yeah.
And I have to fly 1,000 people in to this health system location.
Wow.
Got to provide food, lodging, right, the whole works. And and then ultimately, after 2 weeks of work, the contracts are over and they're terminated. So that kind of brings me to our existing ITSM vendor. So when I need to hire 2,000 people or 1,000 people for a 2-week project, well, I have to pay for every seat in that model. And I don't get that seat for just a month, right? Most of the time, that seat now is a seat of a concurrent license that I own for a year.
Even though...
Or the duration of my contract.
Even though you only really needed that seat for 2 weeks.
Yeah. So, when you think about the evolution of what Amazon is and AWS is, right, it's It's consumption as a service, right? It's next way of thinking of charging you for ones and zeros through hyperspace, right? Like we are paying for all the data we are using, right? It's a use tax. And that's the biggest move for us to do this, right? We do I'd say we probably do 20 to 25 project-based implementations a year where we're doing these 2 to 3 week efforts where we ramp them up and spin them down. But the challenge there, Dan, is sometimes a customer comes to you and says, we're 8 weeks away from implementation, so I can't forecast that. I just have to react.
Yeah.
So when I react, I need to react quickly. And I don't need to be worrying about writing a new SOW, right? To say, hey, I need to increase my user counts, by 1,000 for 1 month.
Mm-hmm.
A, can you do that? B, please let me do that. And then C, how fast can we get this thing turned around for understanding the pricing?
Yeah.
Excuse me. So I'd answer that question, right? Where, Amazon cases or AWS cases, right? It fixed that problem, right? There's no cost for a user seat. There's no cost for a concurrent license. The agents are only charged based on what they do in the system, right? So it's truly a consumption-based program. And, I think that's just next level wave of thinking, right? And I'll even add an extra one on there. I'll add an extra
bonus.
I'll throw my
Love
bonus out there, right? So
all right.
there's, whenever you work with a big box software shop, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're stuck into a 12-month or 2-year contract, right? And when you want to get out of that contract for whatever reason, if it's even the negligence of that user that you support, you're still stuck in it, right? And Amazon has no contracts, right? This is full consumption that I could say, I'll shut this off tomorrow.
Yeah. And you don't pay another dime.
See, I call this doing business with people you like to do business with. Why? Because there is no why. You just like to do business with them, right? They're partners, and I think that's what's great. I've actually even started adopting it into my models, right? I used to be a contract guy, right? Sign up a customer with a commitment. And, we've been moving into a consumption as a service program with a open-ended agreement, right? That just renews, that they can cancel at any time. Why? Because we want to be the partner that they want to do business with. And they're not doing business with us only because they have a contract. So thank you, Amazon. I got that one from you.
Oh, that's amazing. So what else? What else do you love about Amazon Connect, whether that's outcomes you've seen since implementing it, any other insightful nuggets that you want to bestow upon our listeners? Because you've got a lot of them, and I want to hear some more. Is there anything we haven't touched on?
I'll give you one final. I mean, I'm sure people are tired of hearing my voice for sure, Dan, but I would say we talked about building teams.
Yeah.
And, there's this thing called shadow IT, right? Kind of like who's doing the support for your system behind the scenes. And, moving over to the AWS platform has really allowed me to develop staff into new ways, right? AWS has a certification program, right? They have, all the different certifications from, cloud foundations into DevOps, into solution architecture, right? Into data analytics, right? So you have these certification tracks that even get your own internal leadership teams really pumped, right? I can't tell you when we partnered with, our Amazon account manager, Lindsay Heischer, right? She helped us build out a certification program to getting ourselves in the, Amazon certified partner place to be a partner, to partner with health systems or having these same kind of challenges that we've supported so many others doing. And, part of that journey to get there, right, was getting our core foundation leadership team in that lifestyle of certified, knowledgeable, to be able to be on that platform. And I think what has been such a blessing, right, has been that support from not only, Morris is kind of going a step above and beyond to say, hey, let me just help you out, Josh, with that question. We'll, just have kind of a one-off conference call, or two, really working, with, like I said, Lindsay and Steve Wolf over at Amazon, right, where they will be our point person to answer a question, or if they can't answer the question, they get us to the right person that can answer that question, right? So it's not that I ever have just one layer of support, right? And I think that's something that we haven't talked about, right? When you work with a big ITSM or a big contact center solution, you get a dedicated account manager, and that's kind of all you get. Kind of get a dedicated account manager until you say you want to quit, then everybody else comes out,
Right.
Yeah. But at Amazon, you're getting the gift of everyone already, right? We were approached with that certification program, right, with Amazon, right? Amazon came to us and says, hey, we think we can help you with a program that will get you to your goals, right? They listen, right? They don't just, everyone that we partnered with has been good listeners, right? I think when you can listen and absorb and then ask, important information back at you, but then to have a call to action behind it, right? You do something with the information you received versus just, oh, absolutely, we'll do better next time, right? Or to your true point, Dan, we go to ChatGPT, write me a customer satisfaction email to say, I am sorry.
And then that's about all you get.
Yeah, but I mean, I just think that's such a blessing, right? You are getting a family reunion of support, right? I'm talking like the big mega family reunion size of support, right? It's when we were at reInvent, we got to hang out with a bunch of the great humans over there at AWS and Amazon. It was just all of these different folks that knew about what we were trying to accomplish and shared in that journey or shared in that vision and have heard that story of like, hey, Experis is doing this with our contact center and bringing all these different modularities, these modules, right, and almost putting them all together to build this powerhouse contact center solution. And again, it's just been great. Been a great journey.
And it sounds like you weren't getting that before. That sort of relationship with your previous vendors.
Yeah, I mean, you never want to cut down a vendor, right? But there's always, I think a lot of times we think the grass isn't greener on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been almost brainwashed, right, to think that way, right? The devil that you know is the devil that you know.
Yeah.
Right? And the grass isn't always greener.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what? The grass was greener.
Well, that's good.
I mean, it's like
it's
a utopia out there. I mean, now look, don't get me wrong, right? There's been challenges, right? Even with Amazon, like we've had, I think the biggest challenge that I have with AWS, right? And I think this is a very fair one to say out loud to the audience, right? Is you get a product from AWS with limits to it, right? So, Amazon, AWS has their different tiers of usage versus unlocking your account. So you might all of a sudden have this great idea and realize that, well, I just hit my 100 template max and I need to get at least 50 more templates built, or I need 50 more queues, or I need, this much more of XYZ. And if you don't have it real time and you're in a kind of a business problem solution, right? Like, let's just say like you're in the heat of it, right? Like the calls are coming in, you said yes to a customer, you deployed it, you're going live, and all of a sudden you realized, oh shucks, we're at our maximum of something. We now have to go submit for a usage limit increase.
Okay.
And a lot of times, that's pretty quick turnaround. It's like a 24-hour turnaround, which is very fair. But, it'd be nice sometimes to know like that we had those limits.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably like, my big lesson learned for anyone that's coming into a new partnership with AWS is, and I'll say even to Morris, right? You guys helped us with several of those limits, but there were limits that were missed that, we ran into in a heart of fire and we were like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
House is burning right now. We need limits increased. But as you partner with Amazon, right? I mean, they absolutely turn it on. They don't say no. Right. So that's cool. That's fine. That's dandy. But sometimes you're just like, well, why do you even have that there? Right.
Yeah.
Maybe you should forecast with us and say your limit usage is going like this incrementally.
Mm-hmm.
So natively, that means your usage is incrementally increasing. So maybe we just increase all your limits. But I think that there's a lot of little levers inside there, right? It's like a submarine. There's probably all these little dials that they have to turn and turn on. But no, it's been good overall.
So that's great feedback. So would you say a piece of advice to anyone embarking on a similar AWS journey in terms of those limits would be to try to forecast or have foresight into when they're going to hit those limits? They can prepare for them and they don't have to put out those fires.
I think, yeah, I think it's looking at what is limited, right? And almost having a white paper that says these are all the limited features for, business tier, right? And then as you go into, let's just call it custom tier, because I think that's where we're at right now.
Made it
right?
to the custom tier.
If you're in this custom tier, I think that there's what is even something that's put a limit on, right? I mean, I would have thought, for example, right, building queues would never be limited, right? Because the more queues I build would be the more users I can add, right? Which means the more call volume coming in. So natively speaking, I would think that's a win, right? Because we're just adding volume. No, that's something that you gotta watch out for. So I think regular meetings with your AWS, and again, Steve Wolf and Lindsay Heischer have been great with this, right? They meet with me monthly. We do go over limits now. We talk about all the different business initiatives for growth. And I'll just kind of add to say, you got to get in front of your account rep if they're not in front of you, and they do a pretty good job, right, involving themselves in your business. I've worked with, like I said, a lot of great people at AWS, and I just think that should be part of your scope that you bring into your monthly meetings with them, right? To say, we're forecasting this, we might need to increase these thresholds by X%. Yeah, it's a good thought process there, Dan.
Yeah,
that's what I'd throw out to the user base.
That's great advice. Great feedback. Anything else that you want to add before we wrap up here, Josh?
I don't think so, Dan.
Okay.
Appreciate your time today.
Well, I really
Thanks
do
for having me.
appreciate. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time, and I think it's time to go eat some sushi. So let's go on and do that.
All right, let's do it.
All right.
Thanks,
you,
y'all.
Josh. Appreciate it.